is this for your individual edification, or are you going to post it somewhere, just so I know what profanity level to use in my conversation?
Use a lot of profanity so I can post it generally. I think what I will do is air this with you, and then we'll decide what should be done with the experiment. But what I have in mind as a thought is that if people who normally don't teach online are forced to because of the coronavirus, and they're looking for some innovative way to make the experience more interesting, they might find a colleague at another campus or somebody else in their department who's also at home because they're not coming to campus either, and do a kind of discussion video as opposed to a straight lecture video.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you have prior experience of co-teaching?
I absolutely do. In fact, one of my most enriching experiences was co-teaching. Back in the time when the economics of higher education didn't force you, to teach totally by yourself.
And so what drove that in that past experience?
Well, the course, this would be worth recording. I mean, at least I like to reminisce about this. Or are we recording now?
We are recording.
Okay. So Tom McCain, who...
by the way, you maybe can see a recording button at the up.
Oh yeah, sure enough.
Okay.
Okay. So
it's not, in other words, surreptitious. It's...
We introduced a course called Living in the Information Age when the internet was just coming on board.
Okay.
Within the first year of offering it, it became the highest enrolled course in the school, in our School of Communication. And we did it as a conversation. He would say something and I would respond in an antagonistic way. Then he would have to come back and explain to me why I was wrong. This was all in good fun and humor. We were the best of friends and the best instructional pairing that I could have had at the time.
But it wasn't scripted, right? It was somewhat spontaneous?
Totally spontaneous.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we had the set of issues. I mean, for example, we'd say, so what are the things that can't be done on the internet? And he would say, you can't do laundry. And I would say, but now you can do laundry. And here's why, because the transactional economy is different than, and yeah, you're not going to have your friends sitting there and so forth. We go back and forth. And it was a 2-hour course. And because of something I learned at IBM White Plains, you can't sit there for 2 hours. So we would have our 300 students get up and move around just like they do in a caucus. Yeah. How many people Tom made sense? How many people think I made sense? And we'd celebrate our individual victories as they came up. And that was really invigorating for both of us, I think, and for the students.
Just on that point of people not being able to sit that long, if you're making straight lecture online, I think the recommendation is to keep the video under 5 minutes and just make it a micro thing on a very close topic. If we were doing this conversation and let's say it went a half hour, I think I'm going to stop it in 5 more minutes, but let's say then it would be chunked and parts 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever, something like that.
Well, beyond that, I think you could run the full 20 minutes, say, in 4 or 5 minute chunks. Yeah. But you'd have a back channel of students responding, asking questions and things on that order.
Well, and that's the second issue, is whether you should do it with the students live or whether it should be with the students asynchronous. And I'm trying to think this through, and I mentioned before we started recording, I have many quiet students in face-to-face setting. Would it be better to just have a few students who are live and encourage their participation and let the rest be asynchronous? Or should everybody be live, as you suggest with this text stream comment?
No, I think that would be the appropriate approach, to get a small cohort, because if you've got 300 students in a asynchronous environment, you're not going to be able to manage it anyway without some sort of a coordinator that takes the questions and
Right,
asks them out. So
right.
I would do it, I would have a pilot class and I would then release the outcomes of the two
Okay.
changing faculty with that group of students.
So what do you think about this idea in addition, which is if we're going to do multiple sessions like this, you give bonus points to students for asking questions asynchronously, for example, by a paragraph question in the learning management system that you can give points to. And then both of us are confronted with the student questions at the start of our conversation. And so some of what we do is trying to answer either the most common ones or the ones we think are most perplexing, uh, and use them as the fodder for where we go from here.
That would work. And so the last course I taught at Ohio State was called Your Turn, Build the Institution to Meet Your Needs. And what that consisted of was I taught two courses, one on building web design, building a web presence, and the second was based mainly on Freakonomics, some of the different changes and so forth going on. And I would model in about 10 minutes a particular spot in this class, or I would show how to build something in the other class. But the end of the course was each one of them had to teach, had to show me the way that they would run this institution to meet their needs.
Uh-huh.
And that was the way they got bonus points. It was half their grade.
And did they do that face-to-face or online?
They did it both ways. They did
Okay.
it face to face in the Build Your Institution, and then we used that because the students were taking that in the web class to show their institution to quote the world, the people that were going to take the course.
Okay. I have this vague thought that sometimes emergencies can produce something good that has durability beyond the emergency. So I do think interviews or conversations instead of lectures is a more compelling way to go, unless you're presenting highly technical information, which people just want to know. They want an explanation of the technical information, but otherwise, I think the conversation is much more engaging and keeps the audience.
Involved.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And that's why I think the first step in the online, when it became more effective, and I'm not saying it is as effective, is when we reverse the roles. If you got something technical and sequential to present, read it, and then we'll come and talk about it rather than, I'm not going to waste your time, but that's where the Khan Academy came in. Because
Right.
if you're paying attention all the time, you're going to miss something and then it's gone if you can't go back and review it.
Well, and actually, a lot of my videos that I mentioned earlier, made for intermediate micro, or of the Khan Academy sort, although I personally have this love affair for Excel as a visual device. So I've animated the graphs in Excel, and I think have a kind of cool way of showing that. So this, I made them in 2011. They're still getting views now.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
um, but right, I think that stuff can be delivered and watched at the student's leisure, and then the discussion can happen afterwards.
And it's the democratization of the quote presentation of information. People have different ability or desire to absorb. It takes people this much time or that much time to get whatever you're trying to say. And if you give them the autonomy of the information flow, it's more successful, I think, than if you have a unitary way of presenting it.
Yes. Now, I will say something on the downside of this, because my videos are in YouTube, and YouTube does provide analytic information about this. And mean time viewing for almost all my videos is substantially less than the actual duration of the videos.
The length of the video.
So some people are either just in or out doing this, or never intended to watch the full thing to begin with.
The third is, I'm not sure how deep the analytics go, but the majority of full-length videos have a bunch of markers on them that show change in
Viewer.
content or delivery.
Yeah.
So I watch a lot of them that way. I go click, then I'll click over to here if I get tired of whatever's going on in this part of the presentation.
Well, conceivably, if somebody is watching 2 or 3 times the same video, the first time they watch through, and then the other times they're looking for little segments that they didn't get. But I actually think what's going on is people are previewing the video to see if it answers the question that they come to it with, and if it doesn't, they're out of there really quickly. And I dare say, I think that happens in large lectures too. So students are not, I loved large lectures most of the time, and I would sit and listen through the whole thing, but I think that's a minority.
Yeah, and it's a function of if you've got an entertainer as a lecturer, it works.
Yeah, but also if the subject matter happens to match your
interest.
Yeah. So I'm going to record for only a couple of more minutes and then stop this experiment. You have any other thoughts as to how to make something like this engaging or useful so that people who haven't done it before would want to experiment with it further?
I guess the only other thing that I think that I found useful was this idea of replication. So whatever we would do in our class, there would be small groups of students who were required to build the comparable lecture, the comparable idea. And that would A, save me time because they would take up class time, and B, it allowed them to work external to the class, which would be something that would be necessary in this virus environment that we're in too. Because, so you and I are talking as the instructional team, but if the students are co-instructors, and again, their grade comes from the outcome of their collaboration, that's the argument. Of course, then you have the freeloader problem, which I never could fully solve. But.
Yeah. So you think students could have conversations like this that could be a class project?
Yeah, completely.
So the only issue is giving them access to the technology and having sufficient.
They all have access to the technology. Every one of them knows how to use.
I mean, I meant Zoom in particular.
Oh, but I don't think it has to be Zoom. Do you?
Well, I think you need to have a norm for how to deliver the recording part of this stuff, if that's how they're going to show the product. So if you have a whole array of different, somebody's going to have to instruct on the technology usage itself.
I don't see any reason you couldn't give student accounts to Zoom.
Yeah.
And one of the really major differences between if we tried to do this now versus 10 years ago, you don't have to teach the technology. They all know how to use technology in many ways better than I know how to use technology.
Right. Well, for example, you could do a Facebook chat or a Google chat.
Right.
But the recording part, my sense of this is that Murphy's Law likes these situations, and you get partway there, then something causes a snafu. So I'd like to have a solution I knew that works. I think our university is currently not giving Zoom accounts to undergraduates, but I don't know that. It's something I should investigate. And I think you can use the commercial Zoom if you're for under half an hour. You can use that for free.
Is that per session or in aggregate.
per session.
Well, yeah, you're sad because you want these scenarios to play out in 5 minutes.
Right, right. And we've already talked too long, so I am going to stop recording now.